Good morning. Welcome to everybody. Anne, welcome to Tiffany. So, illuminate, O God, bless us with ears to hear your truth, vision to discern your path, and feet ready to move into action. Responding to your call, guide us and inspire us in this moment of proclamation. Amen.
Our first reading is Romans 8:12 through 25. Therefore, brothers and sisters, we have an obligation, but it is not to the flesh, to live according to it. For if you live according to the flesh, you will die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the misdeeds of the body, you will live. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. The Spirit you received does not make you slaves, so that you live in fear again. Rather, the Spirit you received brought you about adoption to sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit himself testifies with our spirit that we are God's children. Now, if we are children, then we are heirs, heirs of God and co-heirs with Christ, if indeed we share in his sufferings, in order that we may also share in his glory. I consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing to the glory that we will be revealed to us. For the creation waits in eager expectation for the children of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to frustration, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberating from its bondage to decay and brought into the freedom and glory of the children of God. We know that the whole creation has been groaning as in pains of childbirth right up to the present time. Not only so, but we ourselves, who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for the adoption of the sonship, to the redemption of our bodies. For in this hope we are saved. But hope that is seen is no hope at all. Who hopes for what they already have? But if we hope for what we do not have yet, we wait for it patiently.
You guys have brought so much to this worship service every time you're here. So I just want to say thank you for always being willing to come up here and talk to me and to color pictures for me. I have some of them hanging up downstairs. I have some of them hanging up at home. But the picture I have for you today has a word on it which says, you can read that. Sound it out. And that silent E throws us off. But hope, hope. Do you know what hope is? What's hope? What's something that you hope for?
Lego.
You hope for Legos, yeah. Maybe if you're a farmer today, you might have hoped for the nice rain that we got that makes everything grow. Like the picture, this word hope is in the middle of flowers. Why would flowers make us think of hope? What do you think?
Because they're like pretty and like they glow.
They grow, right? How do they start out? Like, have you ever seen the very beginning of a flower? It's what? Or even before the stem and the petals grow, like a seed. Now, did you ever look at a seed and think that something like that would come out of it? So a flower teaches us that hope is kind of like that. Sometimes we look at where we are in life or something that's going on in our life, and what it looks like at that moment is maybe not so beautiful and lovely and inspiring like these flowers, but if we have hope, we can see that these flowers are in whatever situation that we're in, and they're going to come blooming out. Do you know what else is like a flower? A leaf. What else? A tree? And plants. What else starts out like a seed and turns into something beautiful? I have 3 of them sitting right in front of me. You probably remember a time, and maybe you remember, George, when Peter was just a little seed in mommy's belly, and you didn't know what was going to come out, right? And just like a little seed turns into a flower, every single person starts out as something filled with hope to become whatever God calls us to be, as beautiful as these flowers and wild and free, and that's how we want to grow in life, right? So what about you? What's something that you hope for? Books. What kind of books do you like? Graphic novels and history books. I wonder, maybe I hope, someday somebody might write a graphic novel about history. Somebody's done that. I bet it's your favorite book. Yes? What do you think? What does this little guy hope for? What do you like? What do you hope for? A nap? Dinos? You hope for dinosaurs? Maybe Jurassic Park someday will be a real thing for you? Wow, I have a lot of hope in my heart these days because everything in my life is like a little seed down in the dirt getting ready for bloom. But what I hope for right now is that when I come back and visit, and that I might see you guys sometime in the future when you keep growing and growing like flowers, you'll say, oh, we remember that lady, that was Pastor Tiffany. And you'll have something exciting to tell me about what's going on in your life, with your church, with new pastors who come here. Does that sound like a good thing to hope for? Okay, but as long as his Jurassic Park dream doesn't come true. Okay, well, we'll just hope for things like flowers and books and Legos and to see each other lots again someday, okay? Would you guys like to color those and maybe share them with some people? Our gospel reading this morning is from the Gospel of Matthew, starting in chapter 13, verses 24 through 30, and also 36 through 43. Continue to listen for the word of God. Jesus put before the crowd another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field, but while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the servants of the householder came to him and said, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? And the master answered, An enemy has done this. And the servant said to him, Well, then do you want us to go and pull them out and gather them up? But he replied, No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, Collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Then Jesus left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples approached him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field." And Jesus said, "The one who sows good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. And just as the weeds are collected and burned up with the fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and evildoers. And they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen." Friends, this is the gospel of our Lord, for which we say, thanks be to God. Gracious, loving Creator, spinner of stories and author of our lives, open our ears to hear, to receive. Wipe away our thoughts that our minds may be a blank slate. Empower our hearts to trust in your love as we hear this word, that may these words offered here and the collective meditations of our hearts and minds be pleasing in your sight, O God, our rock and redeemer. Well, I'm glad to see all of you here, especially those who made a special trip over from White Pigeon, those who I know are traveling and are maybe Zooming or will watch this at another time. I am so grateful for the time that we've had together. And it's been a hot minute since I was here, and so many things have happened. I got a job, I found a place to live, my divorce is final, my house is flipped upside down in 2 areas, me packing for my move, and my daughter also made her decision to attend college also in Columbus. So she'll be following me down a few weeks later with what looks like now a bit more stuff, so hopefully she'll winnow that down because she's getting into a very small dorm room, and I'm still learning my name, changing my address. My brain is in 1,000 different places, and what a blessing it was for me to have time in my week last week to sit with these scriptures and to look forward to coming here with you. And then I get this really tough to grapple with, as they all are, parable of Jesus's. I mean, life is complicated enough, right? Why does Jesus always talk in riddles? So as I'm looking at this parable he told about weeds and wheat, I see that Jesus is speaking in the world's terms. He's using terms from farming, sowing the seed in the land. This was the literal economy of the people that Jesus was talking to and teaching. But we can translate this agricultural metaphor into our own worldly economies. Sowing seed is like the investments we make with our lives. The lessons we learn and teach through parents to children and at school, the seeds of knowledge and gaining skills and working, the seeds we plant through our families, the ways we become rooted and eventually uprooted from different communities, and the seeds we plant in planning for the future. And just like the parable, we see things often in simple terms of good or bad. We make those judgments. We divide things into categories. We sort them and pull things out like weeds. We make inferences about the sower and the enemy, that spreader of weeds, and we can relate to the way that the people in Jesus's little riddle don't like the idea of weeds and wheat occupying the same space, and they want to do what all good gardeners do, rip out the weeds and get rid of them. But this master in Jesus's parable understands something about this wheat and weeds that the servants do not know yet. It's not just as easy as pulling out the weeds. There's some entanglement there that human gardeners alone cannot undo. So the master explains to his servants that it's not their job to pull the weeds or to even give much mind to what is wheat and what is weed, to make those judgments of good or bad, but to let it all grow, to allow for it all, to see that it's all included, and to trust in the work of the harvesters at harvest time, to set free the wheat from the weeds, that the wheat may be gathered into the master's barn. And if we're not entirely clear on the lesson of this parable, or if, like me, you get tripped up about the part at the end about somebody getting thrown into the fire and the weeping and gnashing of teeth, don't worry, we are in good company, right? The disciples couldn't figure this out either. And so in one of those infamous side huddles, Jesus impatiently, lovingly, all of the above, spells it out for them, makes it clear that he's saying the one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man, the field is the world, the good seed are the children of the kingdom, the weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, the reapers are the angels. And then he goes on and talks about this sorting and the burning of fire and the weeping and gnashing of teeth, and that then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. It's a very straightforward interpretation, and it seems pretty clear. Bad news for the weeds, but good news for you if you are righteous. And it might be that simple, but then Jesus goes and does something else. Jesus goes and suffers and dies on the cross for all people, for all children, using his last breath to speak words of forgiveness for the good and the bad, the evil and the righteous, to everyone with ears to hear and even those who are deaf and blind, the lame in body and the lame of spirit. Jesus includes them all in his act of salvation. Actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. And so if faith lives in our lives beyond words on a page, we will struggle with this black and white interpretation of the parable that seems to condemn even the evilest of evil people to that fate of the fiery furnace that no one would want or wish for. That just doesn't seem to be God's will or way, to go through all the trouble of creating every single human life and soul with such particularity, exactly the way we are, warts and all, only to cast some away while saving others. So I try, and I invite you to try to hear even Jesus's explanation of the parable a little metaphorically, with new ears, with an open mind and with an awareness of all aspects of what it is to be human: physical, intellectual, emotional, and spiritual. And these 4 elements are something I have been working with in depth in my own life of prayer and meditation. And as I looked at this week's reading from the book of Romans, I saw this is not just part of my current spiritual journey. All these 4 elements of how humans exist are also talked about in Paul's letter to the church in Rome. So as we heard in today's passage from Romans 8, Paul starts talking about the flesh. So he's first teaching the Romans to recognize that they are physical creatures, the flesh, the material world, the world as our minds create it when we listen to the voices of fear and lack and shame, are all what is included in this concept of body, of flesh. But Paul is teaching the Romans to recognize that they are also spirit, eternal, free, alive, created by God through God's imagination, which is infinitely better than ours. And Paul is teaching the Romans to recognize that voice of the Spirit within them, that cry to Abba, Father, is the cry of the Spirit to its source, a cry that reminds us that we are free and that the path of salvation is cleared away from our fears and worldly sufferings through Christ. So Paul acknowledges the present suffering of the Romans as well as his own suffering and all of the suffering in the world around them. And the times then were not that distant from what we face here. Violence and conflict and mistrust of those in power, abuse of authority, lack of need, insecurity, shame, blame, fear, all of this worldly suffering. And yet, Paul, with the confidence of one who has encountered the risen Christ and claimed kinship as an heir of God, proclaims that the suffering of this present time ain't nothing compared to the glory about to be revealed. Then Paul, in his letter, turns not to the Romans or himself, but to the state of all creation, to the world around them all, the world around us all, and recognizes that things as they seem to be are not how they are meant to be. It's a condition we might call the sin of the world, the brokenness, the pain, but we know when we see it, things as we see them are not how they were meant to be. And Paul explains that creation itself is waiting, is longing for the eyes of God's children to be opened, to see all of creation, our very world, not as our minds filled with the weedy thoughts of fear and anger would paint it or interpret it, but to see all of creation glorious and abundant the way it exists in God's mind. We know the groaning and suffering of all things and our own. But we who have what Paul calls the first fruits, we who have the seeds planted within us that lead to salvation, are called to wait. And not to wait passively or impatiently, but to wait in a particular way, recognizing a positive aspect of the passage of time, that things will change, that nothing gold will stay, nor will the bondage of decay, of evil, of sin, or what we think of as weeds will stay. And in this type of active, positive waiting, we enter a state of hope, a state where we clear away from the canvas of our minds enough of the picture as it has been painted by our limited, fearful thoughts, and trust that the picture that God is painting of our future and of the future of this whole world is glorious beyond imagination. Waiting in the state of hope means we trust enough to leave that space on the canvas of our minds, to leave that space of uncertainty in our lives blank, to continually wipe away the anxious images we involuntarily sketch into that space every day. And by leaving it open, blank, trusting it to God to create, we access something called hope with enough integrity and investment that we keep clearing away more, that we keep expanding that blank space on our canvas, making more and more room to be filled not with our fearful, limited visions, but with God's singular, divine vision for abundant life and love for all creation. I have to tell you, 2 years ago, I never imagined I would be standing here relatively functional and whole and healthy, at peace with the reality that my marriage has ended, that my first church call ended, that my kids are now adulting into a world that I cannot predict or control. But in this relatively short time span, God found me on the path of suffering, tangled in those weeds of the victim mindset, and revealed to me new ways of thinking and being through some of the most loving and generous teachers I know, who are sitting here in this room. You here are among those teachers and have also been so open and receptive to learning whatever this is with me. So I want to invite you to share with me this practice of, even for a moment, surrendering our minds, our vision, our will to God. So go ahead and get comfortable and balanced and centered in how you're seating. Close your eyes. If that helps you, find a space for communion with your Creator. And just take a few deep breaths. And as you do, pay attention to the communion of body and breath, of flesh and spirit that we are. Acknowledge that you are a physical being, that our divine nature is incarnate in bodies that have a purpose and a time of giving us an experience of this world in this world. And whatever your age or relative level of health, we all have many things we can appreciate about our bodies. So take a moment to just settle in and be aware of your body, how it holds you up, and find some gratitude for all that your body has done for you and will yet do for you. And take a breath and just say softly out loud, "Thank you, body." We are more than just flesh. So take a moment and imagine your intellectual self, your learning mind. I always picture mine wearing one of the graduation caps I've had on at various times in my life. That part of me that keeps track of every tidbit of information, that analyzes and processes and, to be honest, overthinks a bit too much. But it is an indivisible part of me and of you. And so for whatever that part of you, intellect, has done good in your life, for what it has gotten you through and helps you get through every day, take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, give thanks to your intellect. Now recognize that part of you that walks alongside your intellect, sometimes in its shadow, peeking out from behind, and that is the emotional self. When I want to connect with my emotional self, sometimes I'll place a hand or two over my heart, and you may want to do that as well. As you breathe and picture in your mind an image of yourself, probably much younger. Our emotional self often manifests and clings to our physical state in childhood. And so maybe it's this inner child you've heard people talk of. And take a moment and acknowledge that beautiful, emotional, the broad palette of feelings from joy to sorrow and everything in between that lives inside you as your emotional self. See that beautiful child and pledge to hear the voice of your emotional self, to allow for all the feelings to walk on equal ground as intellect, and to love and cherish the way that being an emotional being makes you uniquely you. And as you breathe and exhale, say, "Thank you, emotional self." Now simply open your mind to the presence of your spiritual self. And as you breathe, allow your body to take on whatever posture connects you most with your spiritual self. It may be arms out, as you'll often see me or other pastors do in various parts of worship. It's like we have antenna in our body, not just pastors, but everyone, to connect with the energy in the air and around us and all the meaning that it holds as it connects us through time and space. See your spiritual self, its light, its color, the way that it fills your entire body, the way that your spiritual self integrates your emotion and your intellect until you become a singular, guiding, unifying presence made up of all that you are, body, mind, and soul. And see that this is truly how you exist in this world, in this time, and this place,
and that you will also exist in a place beyond this world. As you let the light and energy of your spiritual self unify and connect your whole being, surrender any images, ideas, thoughts, or fears. Wipe clean from your mind any of those weedy thoughts that make you feel fearful or overwhelmed. Let your spiritual guide help you humbly laugh at yourself if in any way you believe that the future depends on you. Now lovingly open your mind and your life to the infinite possibilities for abundance, love, flowers, Legos, parties, family, music, nature, for all that God is creating for you. For all that God is creating for your family, for this church, for this community, and for the whole creation. Breathe, and with every exhale, let your whole being feel and express gratitude for this present moment, for this day, and for the glorious days to come, for a future more beautiful and loving than we can imagine. Trusting that God will open our eyes and reveal goodness in all things. When we open our minds, when we create that blank space in the canvas, when we surrender to God's will. Breathe and become aware of your blessed, beloved body once again. Wiggle your toes, stretch, and when you're ready, open your eyes. And just see how beautiful everyone is at this moment. If you could see the looks on your faces as you rested in those thoughts and images of love. That's who you are. That's who we are. Children of God. See how much we have to be thankful for? I cannot wait to see what God has in store for all of you as a reflection of the love, the generosity that you have shown, not just me, but this whole community for generations and generations. And even in our impatience, we wait with hope, for it is in hope that we are saved. May it be so. Amen.